Welcome everybody to the infrastructure track. My name is Nico Casagrande and I'll be the moderator today. And before we begin, I would just like to remind everybody that when the speakers are not on stage, they all have booths set up in the exhibit hall. So if you'd like to have a chat with anybody, please visit the exhibit hall. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Jason Anderson from ConsenSys. Jason?
Thanks, Nico. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll get started. So as Nico said, I'm Jason Anderson. I'm from ConsenSys, and what we're going to talk about today is some of the products and offerings that ConsenSys has for enterprise blockchain networks, specifically on the infrastructure side, which is Quorum Blockchain Service we'll dig into. And then we'll talk a little bit about, hey, what can you do with Quorum Blockchain Service? How can you rapidly get started with development using the Truffle suite? So with that, we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. If you're not familiar with ConsenSys, we are the #1 pure play blockchain company. And what I mean by that is ConsenSys has been around since the dawn of Ethereum, founded by Joseph Lubin, who's one of the founders of Ethereum. He started ConsenSys, I think in late 2014, early 2015, really with the aim to build out a company that provides services, not just for enterprise, but also for public Ethereum development. And so that spans from our infrastructure services in Furo, which is our public mainnet service, where you can effectively get an API endpoint and begin developing against mainnet or testnets. And then the Quorum stack, the GoQuorum stack and Hyperledger Besu stack, which are enterprise Ethereum compliant, Ethereum compatible blockchain protocols that can be used for standing up enterprise blockchain networks, is what we call a private network, if you will. And then that spans to, as we'll talk about, Truffle today, which has over 6 million downloads, the #1 development tooling environment for Ethereum development. Diligence, which is our service for smart contract auditing and fuzzing. Our product suite Codify, which handles things such as payments and assets. And then, of course, probably everybody's familiar with MetaMask, which is the wallet that you can use for being able to hold your assets, your NFTs, etc. So let's go ahead and dive in. And as we talk about blockchain, everybody in the EEA knows this, but public blockchain initially, really, the public blockchain networks don't meet the needs that enterprises have. The enterprises are attracted to blockchain for the idea of being able to have a multi-party business process where they are able to bring in multiple different companies and that have some sort of business process they share, but be able to trust the data that's on that network and trust those parties. And with public blockchain, with the anonymity of those that are participating, compliance, for example, if you need to do business, or if you need to make sure that you're not doing business in countries that are sanctioned, such as North Korea, obviously you can't guarantee that with public Ethereum. And of course, the issues around cost and performance and privacy. And so hence, that's the whole purpose and why GoQuorum was developed, as well as Hyperledger Besu, as Ethereum compliant protocols that are designed to meet those needs by implementing the privacy, confidentiality components, and allowing you to stand up those networks that are really private. Private networks meaning I can decide who joins that network as for a multi-party business process. So what we'll talk about today is really two elements: Quorum Blockchain Service, which is really about how do I stand that network up? How do I create a private consortium-based network that I can invite other parties to join and ensure that it has the security and compliance and privacy that I need? And then once you have that, then how do I get started quickly in writing smart contracts? And Truffle, we'll dive into that. So launching and managing the network component, right? So building a blockchain network, especially for enterprise blockchain, is a huge undertaking. Standing up a node is not that hard. You can stand up a VM stack or even on a bare metal machine if you like, download eea-eth and the Ethereum virtual machine and get going. But an enterprise network where you need to interact with those multiple parties, each party has to do that, right? And more importantly, the more complex part is how do you then ensure that those multiple nodes are connected together, that they are a part of the same consortium on the same chain? How do you employ governance for that consortium, et cetera? So Quorum Blockchain Service is a service that we developed and is available right now in a private preview. And it's really a follow-on from what Microsoft had built a few years ago. Back in 2018, they had announced and made available Azure Blockchain Service and for a couple of years, and then transitioned that service over to ConsenSys. And I was actually working at Microsoft at that time, and I ran Azure Blockchain Service. And one of the reasons why we transitioned it over at Microsoft over to ConsenSys was really ConsenSys is the best company that's available to provide support not only for the network itself, but also for the protocol. ConsenSys owns the GoQuorum protocol. So by that virtue, we have the ability to provide the best support for customers. So Quorum Blockchain Service is provided and available in Microsoft Azure today, and it's made available as what's called a managed application. And the managed application effectively gives you or gives partners like ConsenSys the ability to bring in a service like Quorum Blockchain Service that lives in the customer subscription. They can provision it, they own that service, but gives ConsenSys the ability to then manage those resources on behalf of the customer. What I mean by managing the resources would be not only standing up the stack, the virtual machine storage, configuring the networking for those multiple nodes that are on the network, but also all the benefits that you would get from a typical PaaS service, such as patching, high availability, maintenance, etc. Now, the way that we architect Quorum Blockchain Service is a little bit different than if you stand up GoQuorum in your own node. What we do is we intentionally separate the transaction node endpoint, which we call the RPC node, from the validator node function. And what the validator node does is ConsenSys, right? So effectively, the RPC node exposes that RPC endpoint. It runs Tessera, which is the privacy transaction manager inside of GoQuorum, so you can send private transactions, holds that private transaction data, where the validator nodes perform ConsenSys on the network. And in this case, that would be eea-eth. One of the benefits of that is the validator nodes don't expose not only an RPC endpoint, but there's no SSH access to those nodes. Effectively, it can significantly limits who can access those nodes down to effectively ConsenSys as the operator and potentially Microsoft, right? So it significantly mitigates that potential Byzantine attack that could exist. Now we offer 3 tiers of service, a very low cost development SKU, which is on very low cost, non-SLA backed VMs from Microsoft. So for about $200 a month, you can run Quorum Blockchain Service to get started with development. And then we have 2 SKUs that are designed for production, business and enterprise, which are running on production grade VMs from Microsoft U2A v4 VMs and have production grade support based on the SKU that you choose. So enterprise and business are the same technical configuration. The only difference is the level of support that we'll talk about in a minute. So one of the core pieces that I alluded to earlier around one of the benefits of Quorum Blockchain Service is this idea of built-in consortium management. So specifically, if I stand up a Quorum Blockchain Service member, I want to invite another company to join my network. What I can effectively do is generate an invite code for them. When they then create their Quorum Blockchain Service, they can then input that code. And when they go ahead and then provision the service, Quorum Blockchain Service will take that code, and then we'll do all the virtual networking needed to connect those members together in a secure manner and make sure that they're obviously on the same chain and federated. And it's that simple. Once you've done that, now you have 2 parties that are on the network and can transact with one another. And this can be done within, literally a couple of minutes. The other benefit of being an Azure service is we're able to expose a lot of the underlying information about the infrastructure. So if you wanted to monitor, for example, the transaction nodes and the validator nodes and take a look at, in this case, you can see, I can see how many transactions have been processed. I can see how many transactions are pending. For example, if I messed up my nuance management and I have a bunch of transactions that are stuck in the queue, I would be able to see that. But more importantly, I could also set alerts on that inside of Azure. So I could be proactively alerted that I have got X number of pending transactions. I need to go check and see what's going on and find a way to fix that so I can get those transactions through or resubmit them, as an example. And then we offer a full suite of APIs to be able to manage the service, which are important for not only getting information such as your DNS endpoint, but more importantly, if you want to secure your network further, add firewall rules, for example, you can do that through the APIs. You can rotate your API keys for security, add additional transaction nodes, etc. We have a long list of customers. This is just a snapshot of some of those that are running on Quorum Blockchain Service today, with use cases spanning from supply chain track and trace to royalties visibility to partners, loyalty tracking programs, and patient health records. And this list just continues to grow. So I wanted to touch real briefly on support. Our support levels really, if you take a look at from a production perspective, that would be the silver and gold plans, which are aligned with the business and enterprise SKUs. We can provide support, within 1 hour, 24/7 for your production applications that are running on Quorum Blockchain Service. And this is important for really 2 reasons. One, if there's an issue with infrastructure, you're having problems, we can respond quickly. But more importantly, if you have questions about, hey, how does Quorum work? Or I've got these pending transactions. Why are they pending? By submitting a support request, ConsenSys, it's again, we own the stack. We can pull in the protocols team and we can give some very detailed answers and even provide feedback into the roadmap of the protocol itself and help you with your smart contract development and issues that might be having. So that's something that's unique that ConsenSys provides that you wouldn't find with another blockchain as a service provider. So to get started, as I mentioned, we're currently in a private preview, but for our EEA members, we're happy to bring you to the front of the list and bring you in if you want to try Quorum Blockchain Service today in that development tier or a production tier. If you go to the Azure Marketplace and search for Quorum Blockchain Service, or if you follow this link directly here below, you hit the contact me, fill out your information, just say you're from the EEA, and we'll get you allow listed into the program and get you access to it right away. All you need is an Azure subscription and we can get you started immediately. So I'm going to switch gears real quick and we're going to jump over and talk about modeling smart contracts with the Truffle suite. So I alluded earlier about Azure Blockchain Service migrating over from Microsoft over to ConsenSys. A whole bunch of other assets came over from Microsoft as well. And one of those was the Azure Blockchain Development Kit, which was an extension for Visual Studio Code, which is one of the most widely popular IDE environments that exist today that developers use. So we've taken stewardship of that. We've made some improvements. It's now been released as the Truffle for VS Code extension. A couple of key things of what you can do with this is it will, number one, natively connect to either Infura if you want to do public development, to Quorum Blockchain Service, or you can do it through a local environment through Ganache. It allows you to very simply not only develop your smart contracts, but has things such as syntax checking, an interactive debugger, and a bunch of other things that I'll show you really quickly. So if you go if you download Visual Studio Code, go into the marketplace, search for Truffle, you'll see Truffle for VS Code. You just install it. Do a quick loop video here. Here's how quickly it is to start a project. You can just start a new Solidity project. If you create a basic project, that's going to download a Truffle box, which is effectively a basic smart contract that you're going to see here. And what that's going to give you would be a very simple smart contract to start with, all the migration files that are needed to deploy that contract, some test scripts, a sample license that you can use if you want to publish it, and the configuration for your Truffle. So what I can do from there, once I have that contract, is I can literally, as you can see, this contract's very simple, but what I can do is I can right click on this. I can build the contract, which will produce the APIs, effectively compile the smart contract. And then if I click deploy, what it's going to do is it's going to then kick off what's called the Truffle dashboard. What the Truffle dashboard is, it's a way to connect MetaMask to a Visual Studio Code such that when you send that transaction, you can actually then use MetaMask as the secure signing mechanism to sign those transactions, rather than taking your seed phrase and encoding it in your Truffle config, which is a really bad idea. So what'll happen here is I deployed that contract. You can see that it's coming through. Here's the incoming request. I can process it. It'll pop up a MetaMask prompt. As you can see, I've already configured MetaMask to connect to QBS. So I just put in the RPC endpoint for my QBS network. I selected that network. I go ahead and confirm that transaction. And then once you go back to Visual Studio Code, you can see that your contract's deployed successfully. So literally with this example, once you get Quorum Blockchain Service provisioned within, like, once you have Visual Studio Code installed and the Truffle Suite extension installed, configured, within 5 minutes you can actually deploy a contract to your blockchain, which is pretty exciting. There's a lot that you can do in addition to that, obviously, but it's a great way to just get started very, very quickly. In addition to that, we're adding additional capabilities where you can publish effectively workflows or microservices from your application's Visual Studio Code. So it's just a way to help developers go faster by providing the scaffolding and the basic template that you need to get started there. I know we're running out of time, so just real quick takeaways. Really, at the end of the day, what enterprises want to do with blockchain is they want to increase trust and transparency in the multi-party business process. So QBS is a solid foundation to get you started quickly. Integration is really key to be able to integrate across all of your applications, and by using tools such as Truffle with Visual Studio Code, we enable developers to go very fast, very quickly. And so with that, I think I have a minute left, and I'm going to take a look at the chat here, see if there's any open questions. So Linus asks, how does this utilize the strength of Ethereum at all? So I'm not sure if you're asking specifically around public Ethereum, but everything that I talked about can work with public Ethereum with using Infura as an example, or any RPC endpoint. If you stood up your own node, you could point those tools to that as well. Quorum Blockchain Service is really designed for enterprises to be able to have those private networks. Now, what's coming are things such as technologies such as bridges and rollups, and Hyperledger Besu, for example, supports the ability to then bridge to mainnet with your private network. And those are some of the advancements that we'll be adding into Quorum Blockchain Service. And so Dylan asks about a DAO. I know we're out of time, but I'll just seed you with this, and then we have to wrap, is that there's some really exciting work that we're doing to further evolve services like Quorum Blockchain Service to be more of a public permissionless, or excuse me, a public permissioned network where you can implement things such as a DAO-based governance structure and have all the benefits that exist with that, not only from a governance perspective, but also from a tokenomic standpoint. So I'll just throw that seed out there. You'll see more about that in the coming months. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the moderator.
Thanks very much, Jason. That was terrific.